Mhm.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the virtual discussion series that is hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. And today we have with us a guest, Dr. Adelman. She is a pediatric surgeon, retired, but she's also an author. She has written several books and is currently working on her third book. But one of the books that she wrote is about a Chaldean family or one particular person, Norma. But from that, she has written about a very important topic. And we're very happy that you are here today, Dr. Edelman, to talk to us about this book that you have written. It's called After Sunday. I'm sorry, After Saturday Comes Sunday. It's a tricky title. It is nice to have you here.
Thank you very much, and you can call me Sue. And the title comes from Norma's husband, Karim Hakim, who told me that when he was living in the old country as a boy, the Muslims used to say, after Saturday comes Sunday. And what they meant by that was, after we get rid of the Jews, we get rid of the Christians. So after we get rid of the Saturday people, we get rid of the Sunday people. And it's interesting, when I've traveled around the Middle East, everybody understands it. You don't have to explain it. So that's the reason for the title. And I learned in the home of Kiram and his wife, Norma, what this has meant to them. Kiram's wife, Norma, they were both very dear friends of mine. Kiram has passed. Norma has been like a mother to me for more than 40 years. She's an incredible person. She's the matriarch of a huge family. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the members of the family, because I've grown to be so close to them, and they've been like family to me, and they've helped me with the book. So Norma, of course, her daughters Patsy, Karen, Joni, Lori, Dale, her sons George, who unfortunately we just lost, Mark and Carl, her sisters-in-law, Rosemary Bannon, Julie Hakim, and really the whole, I can start with grandchildren, but that goes to another 25, 30.
A true Chaldean family.
So, and other members of the community have been very helpful. Judy Jones has been very helpful. Joe Kassab's been very helpful. So it's been a very important part of my life, relating to the Chaldean community.
So, so how did you meet Norma, and then what led you and inspired you to write this book?
I met Norma because I operated on a little boy. He's now about 50. He was 9 at the time, who came from Iraq with disease, which children may catch on a farm sometimes. The little boy, Menhel, did not speak English at the time, and I needed to operate on him. And to translate came Auntie Norma and Auntie Julie. And from that, I met them, and Auntie Norma became to me, Norma, my mother figure. She just drew me into the family, surrounded me with love, helped me take care of Menhel, and the rest is history. So that's the origin of the relationship. It was actually a long, interesting medical story, which we won't get into. So I used to go there when I was a young doctor, and would come home totally exhausted. And instead, I'd go over there, and she'd feed me. And
That's a good plan.
Tut me, and it's going to be fine. And here's the newest grandchild. Put it on your lap, and this kind of thing.
And so, was the relationship part of the reason that motivated you to write the book? What were the elements that she shared with you that made you feel like, okay, this has to be written down, this has to be documented somehow in a book?
Well, I came to know the family. I came to understand the community. I came to see, it was very interesting. I came to see the similarities between her language, and not just mine, but Arabic. I had learned Arabic because my office was in Dearborn, or one of them was. And I learned the Lebanese Arabic to take care of that community. And as I would hear her talking with her in-laws and other people in her family, I could recognize a lot of the words because they resembled Hebrew and they resembled Arabic. So I found that extremely fascinating. But
And
then
that language is Aramaic, by the way.
that's a Chaldean, which is Aramaic.
Chaldean Aramaic, yep.
And the reason why I wrote the book was because of the shock in seeing what happened with ISIS and killing the Christians, and how horrible how horrible it was in the Middle East, what was going on. And I could see, here's this Aramaic language with this rich, rich heritage, which we share. I mean, it's one of the two ancient languages of the Jews. It's the ancient language of the Christians of the Middle East and Mandaeans, but I didn't get into them. It's a very tiny population. And hear this language with all the history, with all the folklore, with the songs, with the recipes, with everything that makes it an incredibly important language for thousands of years. This language was only going to survive as a spoken language if the people who speak that language live in their villages. If they move here, they're going to be like us. The Jews that moved to the United States are, the little boys have their bar mitzvah at age 13 and they learn a little bit. And by and large, unless they're very religious, by and large, they forget it and they never use it. And the language doesn't live as a spoken language. You wouldn't have, before Israel came, you wouldn't have been able to say in Hebrew, give me a pillow and bring me a cup of tea, and then you can go to bed. You wouldn't have said that because that's too colloquial. You would have said, oh, this book teaches the theory of whatever, some fancy thing, but you wouldn't have had normal conversation. So I could see that this Aramaic / Chaldean was going to be dead unless the people who spoke it were in their villages. But how are they supposed to be in their villages if they're getting killed by the people around them? So what needs to be done, what can be done? Now, it turns out, as I researched the book, that there are very significant Chaldean organizations in Iraq and in the United States, which have researched what these specific problems are, what can be done, what should be done, who should do it. And they have a lot of very, very good proposals, very well thought out. And after I finished telling the story of the people, the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, I got the Kurdish Jews in there too, because we're all connected and it made a richer story. After I finished telling the story, then I came in the last chapter to the proposals that actually came from the Chaldeans and pushing Congress to please pass legislation of various sorts with various elements in it. You'll have to buy the book, read the book to see the suggestions. And this is what they need if the US is going to give them any meaningful support. Now, I understand that my Chaldean friends have said, oh, come on, all that needs to be done is turn out the lights, it's finished. But I can't accept that. The Jews didn't accept that. The Jews went back to Israel and created a country. It's there are a lot of challenges, but something can be done. And the proposal is basically a federation proposal for Iraq, with the Christians like one state in a federation.
For a long time now, the Chaldean community has used the Jewish community as an example of having preserved their language and their heritage through storytelling, through community and lobbying and activism. And this is definitely something that we would also need to learn because, we are fairly new to this country compared to other communities. And sometimes it does feel like a lost cause, but we were talking earlier, and there are some villages in Iraq that are still just completely Chaldeans and Assyrians. They're completely Christian that are still using the Aramaic language.
Yeah.
There is, if we can focus from there and and try to like grow from that. But it does feel overwhelming. And what happened with ISIS is fairly new, is in 2014, not that long ago. But it is inspiring that we have somebody that you have done so much research into this book. Again, the book is called After Saturday Comes Sunday. It's available at the Chaldean Cultural Center as well as on Amazon. If you look up Susan Adelman. And what I want to go back to is a relationship.
Let me break in for just a minute. I would really appreciate it if people would order it from Amazon, because I want to make sure that particularly Gorgias Press, my publisher, feels like there's some activity around this book.
And that it's important, the importance of the activity.
And that people are buying it and they need to keep publishing it. They shouldn't think that just because we brought the book out a couple of years ago and had quite a few sales at that time, and it's kind of backed off since then, they shouldn't think that the book has no interest. I want the publisher to continue to be committed to this book.
Yeah, because it's still relevant. This is happening even though you address a Chaldean family and the Aramaic language in Iraq, but there's a lot of issues happening in the Middle East that resemble the same type of situation with regards to Christian Middle Easterners. And then there's the history part. I really enjoyed the historical aspects. What I'd like you to share here, one of which, through the process of writing the book, what did you learn or discover with regards to the relationship between the Jews and the Chaldeans? Because a lot of people are not aware of this. And so this is why this is really important. It's not just about, it is about the Aramaic, but there is a history there that's very fascinating and we should all remember.
It's extremely interesting. First of all, I knew quite a lot about it from talking with Norma and Karam and other members of the family, and friends and neighbors. I mean, there were a lot of conversations around the kitchen table about this. So I was pretty well prepped for that. But I learned, for instance, certain cities like Zakho. Zakho was a very important Jewish community, but it was also an important Christian community. I learned that the Jews and the Christians kind of made common cause because in the Middle East, the Christians never persecuted the Jews. There was another group that persecuted both the Christians and the Jews, and the Christians and the Jews hung together. So they helped each other. They worked together. I mean, in commerce, they were traders. They bought and sold. They had their little their trades. They had shops, and they supported each other. So that's what I really learned. What I really learned was that the Jewish and Christian communities were, in a sense, the same community. I mean, they weren't totally melded together because they had their different religions and their different churches and some little differences in their dietary requirements. But outside of those differences, they ate the same food. They wore the same clothes. They had very similar holidays. And when it hit the fan, they helped each other. And sometimes at the time of great strife, of great danger.
And so this question with, you wrote on page 45, the greatest Jewish community of the ancient world was in Babylonia.
Absolutely.
So tell us about that history and how little by little it became extinct in Iraq.
It wasn't little by little, it was fairly sudden. Originally, in 586 BC, the Babylonians came and destroyed the first temple of the Jews. And they then deported thousands of Jews, basically, to Babylon. Now, in fact, that had happened before. It happened at 722 BC, when the Assyrians had come. And they deported a great many Jews, thousands of Jews, to around Nineveh and north of there, which actually is near where Zakho is. So probably the first deportation went to the area of northwest Iraq, which is Nineveh province. But the Babylonian exile went to Babylonia, and Babylon, as you know, was near where Baghdad is now today. So that population already became established and developed leadership and all the accoutrements of almost like a little country. Then more things happened, and the second temple, I won't go back into the Jews were allowed to go back and rebuild a temple. There was a second temple, and in 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the second temple and expelled the Jews from Jerusalem. And where to go? They went in a lot of directions. But one direction they went was Babylon, because there was an established Jewish community there. They spoke the same languages and so forth. So a huge number of them went there. That became, for maybe 1,000 years, one of the most important, for a while, the most important Jewish community in the world. At one point, 90% of all the Jews lived under Muslim rule, most of them probably in Iraq. So it was a huge, important community. Actually, Baghdad was still 1/3 Jewish before the Second World War. So then what happened? Well, really, when Israel was created, there was pressure from the Arab countries to prevent Israel from actually happening. And in the course of that, there was a war. And in the course of that, there was finally a problem for the Jews. So there was persecution of the Jews. But there was already, actually, I missed something terribly important. I got it out of order. First, there was the Second World War. And in the Second World War, the Nazis had a very important presence in the Middle East. People don't realize how much. So there were many, many problems for the Jews in the Middle East because of the Nazis. Then when Israel was established, essentially the Jews were allowed to leave with no possessions whatsoever and to get the hell out of there and go to Israel. So that was when they left. It was under bad circumstances at that time.
When you mentioned that, I read it, and the first time I read that was in My Father's Paradise.
Yes.
Yes, and this was an intimate.
That was about Zacho. That was about the city of Zacho.
Just when you mentioned that, I thought, yes, that's true, because he goes into detail about that.
That's right.
They were living like he was living with Christians and Muslims, fairly in a peaceful and protected way. And then there was that pressure once Israel was created, and then all the politics involved with it. And it was, very sad how things turned out, but it stayed in his heart. And he was talking about the Aramaic language. And for me, My Father's Paradise was the first introduction about how the Jewish community was there, and that there was that association with the Aramaic. So that is why, and he wrote that many years ago, but it doesn't matter. There are certain books such as yours, again, because in your case, it has so much historical background that I think is very rich with that, very informative, as well as the fact that how you said towards the end, there's like an action that people can take that's still relevant today.
Incidentally, the language, the Aramaic that was spoken by the Jews in Zacho, was fairly different from the Aramaic that was spoken by the Christians.
That's what I was going to say, to ask you, what is the difference? Because that's another thing that I learned. It's not the same Aramaic.
Well, of course, Aramaic is such an old language. It's thousands of years old. And it's such a long history. And at one point, it was the major language in the entire Middle East, all across country after country. And so naturally, with all that time and all these different people speaking it, it started differentiating. And it started changing a little bit with this community, and then a little bit with that community, and with this country, and with that one, until you started to develop all different dialects, but even the dialects evolved until sometimes they were hardly intelligible. Just like when I would be in my office and speaking my Lebanese Arabic, and I would get, let's say if I would get, even from Iraq, if I'd get Iraqi Arabics, but even more Yemenis, they'd come in the office and I'd be like, oh my God, save me. And I'd call Norma's brother-in-law, Jamil, and I'd say, talk to these people. I don't know, they're talking Iraqi Arabic. I have no idea. So that's how it would happen. So over time, and then there was Sumerian Aramaic that would develop, that was in the West Bank. There was Mandaean Aramaic, don't ask. They were all different variations. And it's just because that's languages evolve. And they don't always evolve in exactly the same way. So you would have villages where the Christian Aramaic and the Jewish Aramaic were close enough that they could talk to each other. And you would have villages, in a village even, where the Christian Aramaic had kind of gone one way and the Jewish Aramaic had gone another way, and they could barely talk to each other. So it's just the way languages work. They simplify, the grammar changes a little bit, but the basic grammar of all of them is the same. When I read, unfortunately, I'm terribly slow reading Syriac with the Syriac alphabet because I have to go back and check my alphabet. Some of the letters I forget. But when I see Aramaic, for instance, written in a Jewish prayer book in Hebrew letters, which is how we write it, the words are completely understandable. I can completely understand it. Okay, so Aramaic ends the word with an aleph, and Hebrew ends the word with a hey, but it's the same word, it's obvious.
I learned that the librarian at the Holocaust Memorial Center explained that to me, because there's so much to learn. But I like your description, your explanation about the different dialects in the Arabic community, because I was an interpreter for a while. And yeah, if I'm talking to somebody from Saudi Arabia or
oh my God.
the Yemenis, they told me it's okay. Like one time I was kind of confused, and the Yemenis said, it's okay, you know what? Between us, sometimes we don't, if we're from different villages, we won't even understand each other. So don't think like this is.
That's right. And that's true with Christian villages. There's one professor who's recording the dialects of all different Christian villages from Iraq. They, in case they die, he wants to keep them. When I first met the Hakim family, Norma's brother was over one day. And at that time, I didn't even understand Arabic. I hadn't studied it yet. And he started to say something to me, and then he turned to Norma and he said, Mashima. I knew exactly, because Shemo or it would be Mashima or something like that. In Hebrew, what's her name? And it was so close to Hebrew. Kiram came to the synagogue. Kiram and Norma came to the synagogue when I had my bat mitzvah as an adult. And Kiram was in the synagogue, and he was following the Hebrew service.
Yeah.
From Chaldean. And I've been, of course, in Mother of God, and I can follow the service.
It's beautiful, yes. And I'm interested to know, I'm an author myself, and I know it takes a lot of work, and it could be like a full-time job. But in your case, your life was pretty much dedicated to the medical field. And this was your second book. The first one was a biography that you can also share with us. But like how was your experience in researching and working on the book? It's very well researched, and as is, I assume, the first one that you did, because it's a biography. How has your experience been, going from the medical field and then writing several books that require so much research?
In both cases, the books grew out of my friendship, very close, both cases, more than 40-year friendship. In both cases, with my dear friends who were finally, by the time I wrote the book, almost 95. And the first book, The Rebel, a biography of Ram Jethmalani, was a biography of a very, 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 very famous Indian lawyer, the most famous living lawyer in India at the time. And we had heard, my husband's a law professor, we had heard the legal stories that Ram told for 40 years. So I had the background in terms of sitting in the living room and hearing the stories. And when I decided that I needed to write his biography, because the one that had been written before was childish, so I decided to write his biography, and I simply started working on it. I mean, I got the references to the legal cases from him and his legal associates and daughter and son, who were not daughter, she was gone, but son, who was a lawyer. And I got the legal references, and I just went to the internet and started working. With Norma, with that book, of course, I knew what I knew about the Chaldean community. I knew a lot about the Jewish community. I knew nothing about Kurdish Jews except from my father's paradise. And I just went to the internet and started searching. I ordered in both cases, I ordered tons and tons of books. I prefer hardback and softback to online. I read very, very fast. So I would read like, and I would read each book in like a day or two or something like that, and go on to another book and another book, and another book. And, I'd read about something, that I have to go check it. And I have some journalistic background from when I was in college. And in my background, whenever you have a fact, you need to do at least 2 checks. So you need to confirm it by, if it's a questionable fact, probably you should check it in 3 places, because you don't want to be caught, flat-footed, where you put in a fact, or you got something from Wikipedia and it's just plain not true. So
it seems the heart of that was just the love for the people that you're writing about and extending
yes.
there. Yes. So then, what message do you want your readers to take from this book?
Well, I want my readers, first of all, I want them to meet the Chaldean community and to know them. I wanted them to meet the Kurdish Jewish community, which is very interesting, and then obviously the Assyrian community. But I focused particularly on Norma's community because I was personally close to it. So I want people to know who these people are, not to think of them as foreign or different, to understand that they're us and we're them. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, because they're us and we're them, we have, I feel, an obligation to do what can be done, if something can be done, when something can be done, to try to help them. Hopefully at some point these wars in the Middle East calm down enough that it's actually feasible to go back to some of these villages. It may be that the people that go back aren't going to live there. It may be a retirement place. It may be a summer place. There may be a kind of a tourism aspect to it. I don't know in what way people would go back to these villages, but if they want to, they need to be helped. They need to be helped with development money, with all kinds of protections. They need to have the ability to have their own militias, which incidentally, they're not bad fighters. They're not bad fighters. They have quite a history. I told it in the book of the Christians as being actually hired mercenaries by the Brits. They're very good fighters. But they need to be sure that they're not sort of swamped by the Kurds that take over their fighting units and don't allow the Christians to have leadership of their own units. So there are a lot of things they need to help them to be viable in the Middle East, if they ever expect to be viable.
And what future for the Aramaic language?
I think there's a future. I notice now that there are now websites. Some of the churches are teaching Aramaic, and they can do what we did. I mean, we took Hebrew, which was by the time Israel was formed, it had become almost a literary language. I mean, there were very few people, maybe scholars, that would actually speak the language. It was literary. It wasn't a real living language. They took that language and they then pulled in, you're missing words because it's a 2,000-year-old language. You don't have elevator and escalator. So they borrowed words from Arabic, from Aramaic, they picked up words from French, from Russian, from English, from everywhere. And then they would conjugate the verbs as if they were actual Hebrew verbs, and they would make them into Hebrew words. The same thing can be done to update the Chaldean or Assyrian or any other Aramaic dialect. The same thing can be done to make these really living languages and to teach them and to teach the kids reverence for the language and the importance of understanding it in order to know their culture. So I believe probably this needs to be done through the churches, but it can be done through any schools. Church schools, I think, are another obvious place. And yeah.
There are a lot of listeners that are interested in this and have participated, and even somebody has started a school. I'll be interviewing him. I think his name is Dr. Rocco. I'll be interviewing him next month, I believe in January. You're currently working on a book, or are you working on a book? And if so, what is it about?
Okay, so the book that I'm working on now is putting together, in a way, my two interests, the two books. So I'm asking the question, what is it with Jews that are so interested in India? Now, I have a sneaky reason for asking because I'm a Jew who's very interested in India. So why are we interested? What on earth is the connection between Israel and India? Are there any connections? And my theory is absolutely, because we were all under these huge Persian empires, and connecting the land of Israel and the land of India was Persia, the Zoroastrian religion. And if you look at the origins of Judaism, you start getting into the connections with Zoroastrianism, and then you look at the origins of Hinduism, they're the same as the origins of Zoroastrianism. So it's a very, very interesting, there's a continuum. Again, we are not separate. We are two arms of a continuum, the Jews and the Indians, in between which are the Persians, regardless of what's going on with the Iranians today. The ancient Persians are our link.
So it looks like at the heart of everything that you're right, that you always find that connection with every community. And that seems like that's how big your heart is that you can find that link, which is really, that's what all of it is all about. It's very informative. And once you read something like that, it just helps you kind of like dispel some of the things that you have in mind and the separations that clouds our minds and our hearts. So I really want to thank you for joining us today and sharing all this wonderful information about your book. Again, you can get Susan Adelman's book from Amazon after Saturday comes Sunday. It's a wonderful, wonderful read. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the interview. I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. And there will be a recording of this available on our Facebook and website. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right.